It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. Oh, how are you in this in-between week here? Between Christmas and New Year's. Always a little confusing. Can't remember what day it is, what time it is. Work schedules are a little off. It's that in-between time. And I've been in kind of an in-between mood lately here on the show, I know. Been a little bit remiss on commenting on top stories. By the way, a little side note here. If you're coming to me for the news, that's a mistake. I only cover select stories, and I often miss a large amount of important stories. So don't come to me for the news. You know my usual recommendations. Go to Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! Can't go wrong. First 20 minutes or so, she gives you every headline you need to know. And if something sparks your interest, you can do a little further reading on it. NPR, PBS, can't go wrong. They're kind of middle of the road. They're kind of corporate, but they're decent. And that's really all you want to watch or listen to. The rest you need to read. And again, recommendations are very simple. They're not that difficult. You go to Politico, go to The Intercept, find sources that are not corporate. Within the corporate media, the big ones, New York Times, Washington Post, Atlantic, LA Times, you'll do fine. But I'm going to ask you once again, and just plead with you, unplug, just disconnect from the whole cable world. CNN, MSNBC just need to go away forever. Don't spend a minute on those networks. Unless it's something really breaking in the moment, fine, go ahead. But those ridiculous hour-long opinion shows, and of course I'm not even mentioning Fox. That goes without saying, doesn't it? Of course. I mean, obviously. But I know too many people who are hooked on CNN and MSNBC. What absolute trash. You really don't want to watch these shows. They do nothing but waste your time. They spend 20 minutes on a story that could take 30 seconds. They just fill it up with a lot of chatter and drama. It's really, and I say this today because I'll let you in on a little secret. You know me, I'm not plugged in. I don't believe, I'm philosophically opposed to paying for television. It's all just TV and it's all 90% garbage. So I don't stream, I don't hook up in any way. I don't have cable, I don't have satellite, I don't believe in it. This is my radical stand that I'm taking. Well, here's my confession. The Bucks and the Packers played over the holiday weekend, and I wanted to watch them, and I couldn't get either one of them on my crummy little antenna that I use, my little digital antenna that I use for the limited television I watch. Okay? So my sister offered to give me her password and login for Spectrum. All right. Okay. So I say thank you, but maybe I shouldn't. I don't really want that in my house. I don't want that on my tablet, on my computer. I don't even want it available. But it got down to the wire, and I thought, okay, well, all right, just give it to me for the games. And I used them for the games, and I watched my teams. And so that's fine. But now I've got this temptation on my tablet. And I thought, okay, well, let me just check this out here. And I spent a good part of last night toggling between CNN and MSNBC. And I watched that, I was kind of in and out during that 3-hour block, that prime time block. In the Central Time, that'd be between 7 and 10. So the 7 o'clock show, 8 o'clock show, and 9 o'clock show. Whatever's, and I forget. I think Rachel Maddow's in there, and Wolf Blitzer's in there, and what's his name? I forget. The Last Word with something. Anyway, so I'm going back and forth. And with every minute I watched, I just got more and more annoyed and more convinced that this is just a colossal waste of time for anybody. Any information you can glean from these shows, you can get in 20 minutes of reading. These opinion shows don't do any original reporting at all. Everything they're talking about is taken from the same couple of sources. It's all the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Politico, and that's pretty much it. So they're not doing any reporting. They're just commenting on stories that you're perfectly capable of reading yourself. And they're giving you absolutely nothing except that slow, steady, underlying current, that drip, drip, drip of standardized corporate thinking. So, yeah, I spent an evening watching these guys who I routinely criticize. But I did. I was weak. I gave in to the temptation. It was there waiting for me. I thought, okay, well, let me check this out. What's this really about? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. No, it just confirmed all of my worst criticisms. If you're hooked on the primetime talking heads on CNN and MSNBC, I'm telling you, there's a better world out there. You can kick this habit. You can. You must. This milquetoast group think that they promote. Oh, mercy. And whatever news you are getting, and they're constantly showing quotes and reading clips from the Times and the Post and other legitimate sources. That's fine. But I'll repeat, you can get twice as much, 10 times as much information by reading for half an hour than you get from that whole primetime 3-hour block. Because they zero in on just a handful of stories, sometimes literally just one or two, and they milk it for all it's worth, always teasing the next angle, the next must-not-miss interview, as they lead you by the nose to the next commercial break. And I didn't pull out a stopwatch last night, but I got the impression that the commercial breaks were nearly as lengthy as the news segments, sometimes lengthier. I mean, what a racket they got going over there. Well, speaking of the news here, there are a couple things I want to point you to. If over this holiday stretch here, you've lost track of things. A couple of important things happening. Our man Bernie Sanders. We love Bernie. He is threatening a filibuster. And I'm recording this early morning Tuesday. We'll see what develops Tuesday into Wednesday here. You might know more than I know at this point. But he's threatening a filibuster over this $2,000 stimulus check. Because, of course, the Orange Menace opened the window by threatening not to sign and holding out for $2,000 rather than $600, which is a joke. So anyway, he did sign it. He signed the bill, but the Democrats are walking through the door that he opened. The House already passed the $2,000 stimulus check. Senate Republicans and Mitch McConnell say it's not going to happen. But now Bernie is saying, you know what, Mitch? I'm going to filibuster, and I'm going to keep you here through our little holiday recess that's coming up here for New Year's. Not going to agree to override the president's veto on the military package. And these two stories come together here because the Orange Menace vetoed the $740 billion military spending bill for the most ridiculous reasons. Now, there are lots of reasons to oppose that bill. Don't get me wrong. But his reasons were laughable. His two big things were this Section 230, I think it's called, which is the law that protects internet providers from liability. Well, that makes him mad because he doesn't want people on Twitter being mean to him. And he wants to be able to sue Twitter. So there's that. And then the other issue near and dear to his heart was the provision in the military spending bill that would rename military bases that are currently named after Confederate generals, military leaders. So he's the only person in all of government who thinks this is a bad idea. So he's vetoed the military bill. But not to worry, the House and the Senate had all the numbers they needed and more to override this veto with no trouble. House has already done it. Senate is scheduled to do it, I think, today. And then Bernie, our man Bernie, is playing hardball. He's saying, nope, I'm not going to allow this vote. I'm going to filibuster, and you're not going to get your vote to override unless you also agree to vote on the $2,000 stimulus check. Because Moscow Mitch is not only opposing the $2,000 stimulus check, he's not allowing a vote from the members of the Senate. This is what he does. He just doesn't allow them to vote on issues that get 60, 70, 80, 90% approval of the American people. And this $2,000 check is another example. Bernie tweeted last night the numbers. 84% of Democrats want the Senate to pass a $2,000 direct payment. 73% of Republicans want the Senate to pass a $2,000 direct payment. 74% of independents want the Senate to pass a $2,000 direct payment. The House approved a $2,000 direct payment. Let the Senate vote, Mitch. That's last night, a little after 6 p.m. Our man in the Senate, Bernie, getting it done. Okay, the other items here. Well, this calendar is looking very interesting. We are now 22 days to the inauguration, 3 weeks from tomorrow, so we're inching slowly to that date. But just 5 days from today is January 3rd. Now, that's a very special day because that's when the new Congress is sworn in. Of course, the Georgia runoff that we just mentioned, the 2 Senate seats in Georgia, people have been voting for quite a while, for a few weeks. The actual day itself is January 5th, the final day of voting. And hopefully we'll have a winner or both winners announced, hoping it's not so close that it takes a while to count. We'll see. Right now the polls look pretty good, the small leads for the Democrats, but we'll see. And then the big date on the calendar, I've had this marked in red for quite a while, the joint session of Congress, where they accept and officially count the electoral votes. And then the vice president lowers the gavel and makes the announcement that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have indeed won the election. All right, so that's happening on January 6th, the joint session. Usually it's a formality. Usually it's something that is just a little blip in the news that nobody gives any attention to at all. But this is starting to get pretty serious, this January 6th date. We had a little laugh the other day when we learned that Mike Pence had scheduled a trip to Europe immediately following the vote. Since he's the one who has to make the announcement. Of course, the Orange Menace is going to be very, very unhappy with him. And maybe even send the Proud Boys after him. So, yeah, he scheduled it so he can drop the gavel and then pick up a suitcase and walk right out the door and head right out to the airport. So we all thought that was kind of funny. But it's not quite as funny as it used to be. Let's see, January 6th. Where should I begin here? Well, I guess we'll start here. Louis Gohmert, who is maybe the most extreme of all goofball radical Republicans, has actually filed suit against Mike Pence, asking a judge to force the vice president to use some obscure language in U.S. law to take control of the proceedings on January 6th. Gohmert says that as vice president, Mike Pence can count the votes he wants to count and can throw out the votes he doesn't care to count. This, of course, is insane, and it's not true, and every constitutional lawyer in the country will tell you this. But just the fact that this is happening, and several Republicans, elected officials, are backing Gohmert in this lawsuit. If you don't know, several, I forget which states, Georgia, a few others, had alternate meetings. Back a couple of weeks ago when the Electoral College met, they meet separately in their individual states, and they cast their electoral vote, and the governor and the secretary of state are there, and they make it official, and they count the votes, and they make the announcement, and they go through that whole process. That's the Electoral College doing its thing. Well, like we have alternative facts, now we have alternative votes, because on that same day, rogue electoral voters got together, went through their process, unsanctioned, on their own, with no legal validity, and they went through their own little process, and they cast their votes for the Orange Menace. So the idea then is that they can present their votes to that joint session of Congress on January 6th, and according to this lawsuit, the vice president has the option to accept those votes for the Orange Menace, say in Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Yeah, Pence can accept those votes and throw out the legitimate votes. So once again, you're not going to find a legal scholar, a constitutional expert. You're not going to find one who says this is doable. So we can relax a little bit on that front. The other thing you need to know, again, just in case it's a weird week, you might not be keeping up on things, is that Gohmert and his, I forget how many he's got with him, but there are several Republican House members who are ready and willing to do this. If they object, which they will on January 6th, and if they get at least one Republican senator to object, the House and the Senate go back to their own chambers. There's a couple hours of debate. They fight. They vote. So it just gums up the works. Now, it looked for a while like my own Senator Ron Johnson. There was some thought that he might be that Republican senator. And I'm not quite sure about that anymore. I think that is looking less likely. Mitch McConnell has, in recent days, been really putting his foot down, saying, nope, my senators will not participate in this. But we have a rogue, and that is this nut job from Alabama, newly elected Tommy Tuberville. And he's indicating that he might be that senator. This goofball from Alabama kind of holds it in his hands. Now, you might be thinking, well, okay, it's just a lot of grandstanding. If the legal scholars say nothing can happen, who cares? Let's just get this over with. All right, well, here's the third leg to this stool. The Orange Menace has been talking for weeks about January 6th and encouraging his wingnut supporters to come out and fill the streets. I'm looking at a website right now, wildprotest.com. Wild Protest, taken from one of his tweets where he was asking people to fill the streets on January 6th, and he said it's going to be wild. So wild is now the key word. Hashtag do not certify, hashtag Jan 6, hashtag stop the steal, hashtag wild protest. Yeah, I'm looking at the website right now. President Trump wants you in D.C. January 6th. Here's the tweet from December 18th. Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there. Will be wild! Exclamation point. So this website has a map of the area showing you exactly where to gather at 10 a.m. We the people must take to the U.S. Capitol lawn and steps and tell Congress, do not certify on January 6th. So not only is he continuing with this ridiculous, drummed-up, bogus claim of fraudulent elections, he's used the word wild, and they've picked up on it and making it a rallying cry. And don't you know that the Proud Boys, who've been asked to stand back and stand by, are taking that as an official invitation, a call to arms. In fact, remember last time, a couple of weeks ago, they had stolen flags from a couple of black churches, flags and signs, and they burned them. And then they got drunk and caused a lot of havoc at this Harrington hotel. Looking at an article now from, HuffPost. The Hotel Harrington was where they got together, their little hangout. Well, Harrington has announced that they're going to close on January 6th in anticipation of more trouble. There were stabbings on, it was December 12th that happened. Proud Boys were out looking for trouble, instigating violence. I mean, real violence. Reading from the HuffPost here, Trump, meanwhile, is rallying his supporters to take to the streets January 6th. Be there, the president tweeted earlier this month, will be wild. Fringe chat forums and other online posts indicate far-right demonstrators are workshopping ways to smuggle guns into the District of Columbia. Carrying weapons without a permit is prohibited in the District of Columbia, and guns are banned at all protests. The hotel told the Washington Post that the growing Proud Boys presence is unnerving other guests and staff, many of them black and Hispanic. So, yeah, the Harrington has announced they're just closing up, shutting down for January 6th, and who knows what's going to happen. Now, I've been thinking about this. I don't know what the right answer is. I'd kind of like to see counter protests. Now, obviously, that invites violence because that's what the Proud Boys and the rest of them are all about. They're looking for trouble. They're looking for any excuse. But when it's all said and done, wouldn't it be great to outnumber the Orange Menace supporters 10 to 1, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1? If they're able to get 1,000 people on the streets, wouldn't it be great if we had 10,000 or 100,000 peacefully protesting, just shouting them down? There'd have to be great discipline. There'd have to be really excellent training in nonviolence and an absolute commitment by everyone involved. But I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea because of the very nature of these guys. But then again, you can't surrender before the fact. You can't not go out for fear of violence and just leave the streets to them entirely, exclusively. Let them have the attention of the national media. And they're going to have numbers. They're going to have 1,000 or 2 or 5,000. I mean, it's quite possible. Often we like to just sort of laugh them off and mock them for their small numbers. But you know what? They're probably going to have some pretty good numbers on January 6th. I'll bet it's over 1,000. And that looks really big when the cameras are focused in. You know, you take a wide shot, you take an aerial shot of the whole city, it doesn't look so impressive. But depending on the angles the news producers care to share, that can look really menacing. So I'm thinking it'd be awfully nice to give the counter message, and again, to outnumber them 10 to 1, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1, and just completely shut them down visually. When the American people see this on the nightly news on January 6th, they see that by comparison, this really is a tiny fringe of whack jobs. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that. And I'm still holding out hope, and I know you'll think I'm crazy for even saying it out loud. I'm still holding out hope that Mike Pence and a majority of the White House cabinet will at some point see the light, just have reached the limit here, and said, no, the 25th Amendment is really our only course of action right now. I mean, what's going to be the final straw? He's openly inciting violence on the streets of the capital of the United States. In addition to his long list of crimes over his administration, we can now add these recent pardons, which, according to some scholars I'm reading, are crimes in and of themselves. The pardons of Flynn, Stone, and Manafort, according to Lawrence Tribe, are likely crimes in and of themselves. The pardons themselves are a crime. Because as sweeping as that pardon power is, you can't pardon someone in order to reward them for keeping silent in covering up your own crimes. In other words, you can't pardon a co-conspirator. And even though the president has not been indicted of a crime, well, it's only because he's president. As soon as he's out of office, that option is absolutely open and available, not only to state jurisdictions like we've been hearing about in New York, but to President Biden's new attorney general, who will also have the option to go back and investigate criminal activity by the Orange Menace while he was president. It's certainly within the rights, and it's the duty of the new AG to investigate these crimes. And Mueller has already done much of the work for us. In his report, he gave us 10 separate, distinct incidents of criminal wrongdoing. He told Congress, I can't indict because of my unique position as special counsel. But you can impeach him, which they did. But then 52 Republican senators decided to just toss the whole thing out, not even allow a trial, not allow witnesses, voted to acquit in defiance of the evidence that was presented. So those 52 senators have a lot to answer for. This 2020 shit show cluster that the Orange Menace made worse by 10-fold, 100-fold, this terrible pandemic reaching unthinkable levels solely because of the Orange Menace and his incompetence, his cruelty, his negligence, his dereliction of duty. This guy is guilty of negligent homicide on a scale that surpasses every mass murderer in the history of this country combined. But the thing is, he never should have been in office. He should have been out on his ear. He should have been on the helicopter back in January. But nope, 52 Republican senators said, no, we're okay with this. We're okay with this guy. The murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the civil unrest that ensued, it did not have to play out the way it played out, with the Orange Menace and his toadies pouring gasoline on every fire, attacking peaceful protesters with chemical agents, employing secret federal troops, his own personal Gestapo. The whole summer would have gone down very differently. Remember, the initial reaction to the massive peaceful protests were nothing but positive. Black Lives Matter. 70-80% of Americans were in support. People, for the first time, were listening. They were engaged. They'd seen enough and were ready to at least try to understand the scourge of racism and to try to be a part of the solution. The Orange Menace single-handedly squashed what looked like an opportunity, albeit sparked by tragedy, of course. But think how this might have gone down without him in the Oval Office. And I know nobody likes Mike Pence, but the Orange Menace is singularly unique in his amalgam of incompetence, cruelty, vindictiveness, and power lust. And so now, once again, I call on Mike Pence and the cabinet. Invoke the 25th. Haven't you seen enough? There's a pretty good chance now that Mike Pence isn't even going to show up to perform his constitutional duty on January 6th, to preside over this joint session of Congress and declare Joe Biden and Kamala Harris the winners. At this point, if I'm going to make a prediction, you know what? I'll bet he's not even there. I'll bet he doesn't even show, because he hasn't got the cojones to do it. So I'm asking you, Mike, at the 11th hour here, save yourself in the pages of history. Stand up. Show some integrity. Take him out with the 25th. Make yourself president for the last 3 weeks. Go to Joe's inauguration. Stand there like an outgoing president is supposed to while Joe takes the oath. Welcome him into the White House. Be a mensch. Be a person. You need to boot the Orange Menace's ass to the curb, and you will not only be doing a great service to this nation, and not only for the history books, not only for posterity, I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about the clear and present danger he presents right now as we speak. So you'll be doing all that, and you'll be saving your own butt. The historians are going to love you. They're going to say, yeah, he was a weasel, but in the end, he saw the light. At least he did the right thing in the final weeks. I know it's a long shot, but Mike, if you're listening, I guarantee you it's the right thing to do. You won't regret it. All right. Well, a couple of days here to go in 2020. Again, this calendar, it's really pretty damn interesting. Just a few days to the new Congress is sworn in, and then a couple days after that, the Georgia Senate runoff, and then the day after, January 6th, that joint session of Congress. Man, what a calendar. What a week we got going here. We'll make it. We've made it through everything so far. Let's keep going. All right. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.